Hello, welcome to this introduction to Wasabi Cloud NAS video. My name is Neil, I'm a Senior Systems Engineer for Wasabi in the UK. So what is Wasabi Cloud NAS? Well, Wasabi Cloud NAS is a software application that end user customers install on a local Windows server or a PC to pair a source, and that source can be a locally mounted NTFS volume or a NFS or SMB network share, and it pairs the source with a target storage bucket in the Wasabi Cloud. So Cloud NAS automates the assignment of data to the source or the target tier based on user-defined policies. So Cloud NAS is there to address different workflow challenges. These could be from the alignment of data with storage costs, transparent data migration and synchronization between storage devices or geographically dispersed places, to extending primary storage to Wasabi Cloud Object Storage. Wasabi Cloud NAS addresses these issues by combining the best of both file storage and object storage. Cloud NAS maintains a familiar hierarchical file folder system and combines it with an object storage backend that scales infinitely while reducing costs. So we all know the never-ending NAS buying cycle. So you've got an on-premises NAS array, and it generally, when users start using it, storing more data, they start running out of capacity. Now, administrators are then tasked with cleaning up the old files. Users store data from when they join the company, they put stuff in their home drives and their department drives. They never delete it out. Why would they? They're not paying for the storage themselves, and they never know whether they'll need that file again in the future. So it just sits there taking up space. So the administrators are tasked with cleaning up these older files, but the administrators don't really know what data to delete, or if they're going to move or archive some data, where to store it, or what to do with it. So inevitably what happens is small amounts of data get deleted, not really very much. This doesn't really help the storage array from running out of capacity. And then the inevitable happens, the organization buys more expensive on-premise storage. And this cycle goes round and round and round. Now, the idea of Cloud NAS is we can break the never-ending buying cycle by introducing Cloud NAS into the infrastructure. And instead of just keep buying more additional hardware, we'll automatically move those older files out to Wasabi, clearing up all that space on the on-premises file system to allow more data to be saved locally. So we do this with two methods. The first is sync, and then the second is space reclaim. So when we install Cloud NAS, we point it, as I said, at the NFS amount or the NFS or SMB shares coming from NAS systems. We then set a policy to synchronize all of the data, and we decide how often that synchronization occurs. So it could be, it could be 1 minute, it could be every 5 minutes, it could be every half an hour, it could be once a day. The user defines how often they want that synchronization to occur, depending on how quickly they want the on-premises files protected with a secure copy in the Wasabi Cloud. Once you protect a file, you get a nice little green cloud next to the file with a tick in it. So this tells you that the data is locally on the NAS, and also there is a copy stored with Wasabi. You can also define a policy to decide what happens if the local copy gets deleted, whether you want to keep the cloud copy or whether you also want to delete the copy that's held on the object storage. We can then go ahead and define a second policy, and the second policy will look for aging files. So the customer again will decide how strict they want that policy to be. So whether they want to say, anything that's 1 month old, I don't want on my expensive NAS system. Or maybe it might be less than that. You might say, okay, anything that's 6 months, anything that hasn't been accessed in over 6 months, I want that moved off and not sitting on my expensive on-premise file system. So when we install that policy, it will go through the files, and anything that's not been accessed for the certain amount of time, it will move those files off, sorry, not move the files off, it will stub those files off, just leaving behind a small stub file while the main file lives only in Wasabi. Now, the idea of the stub file is that if the user or application does want to recall that file in the future, they can just go ahead and recall the file, and it will automatically be returned and put in a place where it can be easily accessed. And again, when a file is only in Wasabi, so it's not local, it's been stubbed off, the green cloud just turns into a nice white empty cloud. That tells you that the data is only in the Wasabi cloud, and actually the little thing that's on premises is just the stub file. So just a bit more on how the stubbing works. So when we look at a file, there's two portions. There is the stub at the front. The stub contains all the metadata information. So things like the size of the file, the date, when it was made, when it was last accessed, who owns the file. All that information is held in the small little 4K section at the start of the file, and then the rest of the file is the content. And this can be much, much bigger than the actual size of the stub itself. So you can see how Wasabi Cloud NAS helps you to save space, because when we do reclaim a file, we are only leaving behind the stub, the very small 4K section, and we are removing the content. The content lives up with Wasabi, and the stub lives back down on the on-premises array. We do also keep a copy of the stub up with the file in Wasabi as well. So this is also useful to disaster-proof your file storage. If you remember, we synchronize everything on the shares that you decide. So when you've installed Wasabi Cloud NAS and set it up against your local file server, you get a synchronized copy of all of that data. Now, in the unfortunate event that something happens to that file server, so, you know, for this video, it's actually caught fire. So it's on fire, and we put it out, and the data is unusable. So we've got a useless filer now. So what we do is we go ahead and we replace that filer with a new one. And then we install Cloud NAS again, and we set up the link to Wasabi. Now what will happen then is you'll get asked the question whether you want to, how you want to retrieve the files, whether you want to retrieve everything in full fat form, so the stub and the content, or whether you just want to retrieve the stub so that users can, you know, all the stubs will restore fairly quickly because they're all fairly small. And then users, as they start accessing those files, the full fat versions of those files will then be recalled for the users to access. So Cloud NAS is great for tiering solution, as a tiering solution. You know, a lot of vendors out there do have their own tiering, vendor-specific cloud tiering products within their solutions, like Cloud Pools or Cloud Snap, Fabric Pools, Cloud Bank. But they are locked into those vendors, so you couldn't use Cloud Bank from HPE with, you know, a Dell storage array. Whereas the Wasabi Cloud NAS is open, you know, multi-vendor and in an open file format. So as long as we can access the shares, the SMB or NFS shares from the file system, then we can synchronize that data quite happily. And the data lives up in our cloud in its native hierarchical file format. So last but not least, we can also enable immutable storage for those file shares. So if you've got data that you want to use with Cloud NAS and send up to Wasabi to make sure it's you've got 2 copies of data, but you also want to make sure that if you're hit with ransomware or anything like that, that cloud copy cannot be changed. Well, you can enable immutability on that Wasabi bucket, and that means that the data that's put inside the bucket cannot be changed by anybody, and I mean absolutely anybody, for the amount of time that you design on the file system. So if you say I want my bucket to be immutable for 6 months, you know that all new data that gets put into that cloud bucket cannot be changed by anybody for 6 months. So that also means ransomware attackers will not have any access to that data. They may be able to disrupt your on-premises copies, but you're happy in the knowledge that you've got an immutable copy of your file data stored with Wasabi. So I hope you installed that video. We do have a sign up process. If you go to wasabi.com, you can see you can sign up for a free trial of Cloud NAS. It's a 30-day 1 terabyte trial. We don't ask for a credit card or anything like that. You can just go ahead and try the product, and there's a full documentation and everything on there as well. I am going to also do a GUI demo straight after this video, so you can go ahead and watch that and see Cloud NAS in action. Thank you for listening to me today.